Christmas and New Year break, for the last couple of years, I've been indulging myself with a little bit of Amstrad CPC programming. CPC was the computer that I had in my household when I was growing up. It's a computer that I learned to program on. And I never felt like I'd mastered it really. When I was a kid back in the 80s, we didn't have the access to the information and the tools that we do these days. So, around this time of year, every year, I like to play around and sort of do some of the things that I never got to do when I was a kid. The first year wasn't so exciting. I was learning how to set up the colours and write some basic sprite routines. Little alien guy. How to scan the keyboard. Just sort of trying to figure out what you could actually do, what kind of speeds you could get. Write some basic tile routines, some textured fills, some disappointingly slow sprite routines. But I came back and I wrote some faster ones, and this year I had enough bits and pieces that could start to get interesting. Bomb jack! Well, it's not quite bomb jack. You can't pick up the bombs yet. You can't get killed by the enemies yet. But it's the bones of bomb jack. And it's running at 50 Hz, which is pretty good considering all the sprites I've got going on the screen there. And there's no actual sprites on the CPC, so you have to draw them all with the CPU. This is very approximate motion on the enemies at the moment. This is all just a first pass. Now the player is pretty accurate, I think. That was the easy part. I'm trying to figure out exactly how the bird moves. Might take a little bit more work. One thing that you realise very early on when you're making a Pac-Man style of game, and I would say that this is a Pac-Man variant, it's kind of a sideways Pac-Man. If you make all of the enemies follow the player, then they'll just all kind of clump together and turn into one. You know, that's trivial to get around them. I can only draw 11 sprites on the screen at a time. I have no time to draw any more than that and still do the colour effects and other things and run the logic. You can't afford to have multiple sprites clumping up like that. It's a waste. You could make them all aware of each other and space themselves out, but this is the 80s. We can't afford that kind of CPU time to have them all checking up on each other. We need something that's going to come from emergent behaviour. And actually we do want to have them clumping up together sometimes, because having them come together and then drift apart again is part of what makes the play space dynamic. You know, if it was too uniformly spread out, then the difficulty wouldn't have peaks and troughs. You need to be constantly moving from more dangerous areas to safer areas. So the solution is that you give all the chasers different behaviours so that they don't all make the same decisions when they are put in the same position. So they can come together and then split apart again. So that brings us to this guy here. He is the dumbest enemy in the game. He does nothing whatsoever dynamic. He just bounces around the level. He only responds to the platforms, and the platforms don't move, which means he's stuck on a loop. You know exactly what he's going to do every time. And if you get a whole bunch of them together and put them all in part of the same loop, they're just going to follow each other around like a train. This is still quite a long loop though that they're on here, and as soon as you have them spawning from multiple places in the level, then they potentially form more than one loop that may be on different cyclic periods, and so the interaction of them, you know, could take years before it repeats. So when we see a screen full of these extremely dumb enemies all bouncing around, they're actually doing what you want to see in a game like this. They're spreading out and they're coming together, and it's actually quite fun just trying to navigate through this field of incredibly stupid enemies. It's more effective as a game than the enemies that home in on you when taken on their own. So what Bombjack does is they create two hybrid enemies by making one that bounces up and down and homes in on you on the left and right axis, and another one that does the opposite. It bounces left and right and homes in on you on the up and down axis. These ones do suffer from the same clumping problem as the Chaser, but they only clump on one axis. If you have too many of them, they could actually, the potential is there for them to just form a wall that will sweep right through the level and that you can't actually save yourself from. But if you take all of these different behaviours, and there's a couple I haven't mentioned yet, but the bird could probably fill a video on its own. If you take all of these different behaviours, giving them to individual enemies, not having more than one or two of each kind, except for the bouncy guys, which you can throw in as pretty much as many as you like, then the resulting chaos, the interaction between them, produces the kind of gameplay that you want. You've got enemies chasing you, they run you down, but they also spread out, they don't all clump together. The individual enemies are easy to predict, they've got very predictable behaviours, but when you're faced with 10 of them, 9 of them at the same time, the overall situation is dynamic and not so easy to predict, as there's no obvious exploit. And that's important because this was an arcade game after all, and if there was an easy exploit, then people would just sit on it all day and the arcade operators would lose money, so it was very important to get these things right. Anyway, that's my little holiday project. Probably far enough along now that it's worth finishing, I guess. Maybe next year.